So we are going to get started. Good morning. Welcome to the first webinar in a series of 3 on the topic of virtual direct education for CalFresh Healthy Living during COVID-19. This webinar will be recorded and shared after this presentation. I want to start off by thanking you for taking the time to join us today and introducing who we have on this webinar. My name is Danielle Boulay. I'm the training manager at Leah's Pantry. And I'm joined by Adrienne Markworth, our executive director, and also Lauren Small, who's our program coordinator. This webinar is funded by the CalFresh Healthy Living program. Thank you, as always, for your partnership in this work. For those of you who are on this webinar outside of California, the CalFresh Healthy Living program is what we call our SNAP-Ed program in California. We'll be using that terminology during this webinar in case you are feeling confused. And we'll be using a few other shorthand terms as well, which help identify different California state implementing agencies and their local offices. But for the most part, information on this webinar is applicable both inside and outside of SNAP-Ed programs. So before we move into the topic of the day, we have to acknowledge that we are also doing this work in the midst of a massive uprising against racial injustice in our country right now. Many of us already know that Black, Native American, and Latino communities face food insecurity and chronic illness at a higher rate in the United States. These communities are also the ones that have faced the worst economic and health impacts from the COVID-19 crisis. In all of our work, we are now being called to bravely contend with the fact that racial injustice and systemic inequality have led to the conditions that threaten the health and well-being of these communities. So in regard to today's webinar, we want to make space for the complexity and difficulty of what is going on in our world right now and the different emotions that we might be holding. Throughout the webinar, we encourage you to check in with your mind and body and just note where you are. You're welcome to take some deep breaths, move around, or do whatever you need to in order to be grounded. So why are we here today? Many of us can no longer do our planned work because of COVID-19 restrictions, but we want to use the virtual environment in an allowable and impactful way. We asked you about your current activities during the webinar registration and got quite a mix of responses. Some of you have jumped right into direct education online, offering virtual classes via Zoom, Facebook Live, and GoToMeeting. Many of you started off with indirect education, preparing videos and sharing them through your networks. And some of you are just getting started squarely in the planning stages and looking to learn today. So here's an overview of the 3 webinars we're hosting for your reference. Today we'll focus on planning. Next week we'll focus on marketing and promotion. We know that there are a lot of questions about this aspect based on your registration info, so we wanted to dedicate an entire webinar to it. And then finally, the 3rd webinar is implementation. During the webinar, we'll be referring to a resource guide, which we will share in the chat box and also send out via email after the webinar today as well. We'll share it both as a Google Doc and also a Dropbox link. If you are unable to access either of those platforms, please just reach out to Lauren at leahspantry.org and she'll send you a digital PDF. This resource is going to be updated on an ongoing basis, so bookmark it for your reference and feel free to share anything you'd like to see added. So today we will start off by briefly introducing Leah's Pantry. Then we'll share a few thoughts on the impact of COVID-19 on this work. Next, we'll move into the building blocks of an online pivot to virtual delivery. And this webinar will provide ideas and resources to set your programs up for success. And last, we will hear from our guest speaker, Valeria from the Institute of Public Strategies, a CalFresh Healthy Living subcontractor working in Pomona. And they've got a great story, so we're excited to have them share. And during the webinar, we ask that you use the Q&A feature to ask a question to one of us, and then use the chat feature to participate and comment more casually. Since there are over 300 people on this webinar, it'll help us organize the questions when they come through the Q&A feature. So we've set this up as a Zoom webinar, not a Zoom meeting, so there are a few differences to be aware of. This screenshot shows the difference between the Q&A feature and the chat feature. And yes, that is Daryl Hammond on the screenshot. Our staff recently had the pleasure of attending a webinar with trauma-informed care heavyweights about his Netflix documentary, Cracked Up. And we recommend watching if you can. And please feel free to comment in the chat box so we can all learn from one another as much as possible. So let's get started with this right off the bat. Moving to online direct ed is a big change and might bring up a variety of feelings for many of you. I know it did for me. Some of you might feel nervous, some of you might feel excited. So in the chat box now, share with the group what you are feeling when you think about this change. We'll come back to your responses in a minute. Great, there are a ton coming in already. And know that we also go through the chat feature, the chat recording afterwards, so we can gather all these comments. So you can keep sharing kind of your perspective and how you're feeling, but I'm gonna hand things over to Adrian. And again, we'll come back to some of your responses.
Okay, hi everybody, good morning. Thank you all for being here. Just want to echo what Danielle said. I'll take a minute to introduce Leah's Pantry. Some of you have heard this many times, but we do have some new people on this webinar, so I would be remiss not to introduce us. We were founded in San Francisco in 2006. Which means we're actually approaching our 14th year this fall, which is really very exciting. Our mission is to improve the health, wellness, and resilience of communities through trauma-informed nutrition education. We have 3 basic strategies. First, we facilitate direct implementation of products and programs in communities. This is why our staff has so much experience to draw from in our training programs. And this is where we really learn from the communities where we work. Second, we work with organizations to build capacity and to integrate effective nutrition support. So hopefully after this webinar, you all will have what you need to get started planning your activities. And last, we expand the frame of public health, nutrition, and food security, often leading to changes at the policy and systems level. We feel strongly about the potential for public health and nutrition security to move in a trauma-informed and resilience-informed direction, and to include protective factors and healing practices into the field more explicitly. I want to highlight 2 values. We have about 5 values, but I'm just going to stick with 2 that I think are really relevant for today's webinar. First, we commit to healthy relationships that prioritize compassion and connection. I'm bringing this up because to me, this is the main challenges of moving our work to a virtual environment. And certainly as I'm monitoring the chat box right now, this is something that you guys are really, really missing as well. So hopefully we'll create a little space to talk about that today and to think of ways where we can really involve participants as deeply as possible in the programming. And we'll be addressing that especially during the 3rd webinar around implementation. The second value that I want to highlight is needing to center our work around diverse voices. And that's why thoughtful and intentional planning is such a necessity. As you'll see today, planning for virtual direct education is not just technical planning. It's not just choosing the platform and figuring out how to get everybody to log in, but it's really finding ways to listen and respond to the unique needs of your communities. Before we jump into suggestions for planning in this new environment, I do want to take a moment to examine how this change affects us as professionals. And I think the chat box is definitely echoing this in terms of what I'm hearing. Sandra Bloom's SELF model is an acronym that represents the 4 interactive key aspects of recovery from bad experiences. She describes SELF as a nonlinear cognitive behavioral therapeutic approach for facilitating movement, regardless of whether we're talking about individual clients, families, staff problems, or whole organizational dilemmas. I personally find it useful for helping to process change of any kind, even changes which on their face may not be bad changes. It's helped me realize that change affects everyone differently, and that my perspective on whether a change is bad or good is not always universal. It also helps with the yes and approach that we're trying to embody at Leah's Pantry. We can hear and accept others' perspectives while also having space to share our own, and all perspectives can be true. So applying the SELF model to online virtual direct education, I think, is appropriate as we get started. Many of you on this call have been really successful at making an impact in your community through personal direct education. You're skilled facilitators and relationship builders, and there's safety in knowing how to implement these activities. But due to COVID-19, it's no longer safe to congregate in the same ways that we have before, so we have a tension here. In order to keep our participants and ourselves safer, we have to reimagine our work and forego the safety that accompanies our prior professional experience. A few minutes ago, I asked you to share what kinds of feelings arose with this change. So reading through a few of these responses, I see a lot of people miss the participation and getting the feedback. People miss the opportunity to build rapport and genuine relationships. A lot of questions getting answered immediately, right? It takes a while to type things out. You feel like you may have missed it. I mean, I'm certainly experiencing this right now in this moment, right? There's a ton of different things coming in. I want to respond to all of you. Food demonstrations, we're missing that. We're missing the activities and the engagement, getting to know people as individuals, right? When it comes to getting people to participate, the awkward over-talking that happens on Zoom. We were actually just discussing this yesterday, developing the webinar script. You know, how do we gently invite people to participate without making them feel as though they have to participate if they don't want to participate? So just dealing with that social awkwardness. So there is some loss going on here. You know, we know that even when restrictions are lifted, and in some counties, you may already be planning on resuming some in-person direct education, it's not going to go back to how things were in 2019. Some people are just going to opt out of congregate education, and some parts of that education, such as group recipe preparation, may be too risky to include. Overall, we anticipate that virtual education will remain a part of CalFresh Healthy Living for the foreseeable future. But with a growth and change mindset, we can both mourn a loss and feel excitement about the future. The creativity and optimism that many of you are bringing to this situation, and we certainly saw a lot of positive responses in the chat box too. I feel creative, I feel optimistic, I feel excited. Really set a vision for the rest of us to follow. So that's that future circle. This webinar series is designed to help your organization set its own unique vision for the future while also learning from each other. We'll have guest speakers on each webinar who can share their experiences, and we'll share a PowerPoint template, which some of you have already seen, for you to respond back to us with your own best practices. Right now, it's hard to see the future. Instead of thinking about getting back to normal, we're actually using 2 phrases. One of them is the new normal, which is sort of where we are right now. But the other one, if I can, there we go, we're calling the next normal. So what are things going to look like next? We know for sure that shelter-in-place ordinances have drastically changed the way that people shop for food. For many, it's also significantly altered eating patterns. Food shortages, purchasing limits, and reluctance to go to the grocery shopping due to health concerns have changed what people buy, when they buy, and really how frequently. Transportation and food access, always challenging, have become even worse as public transportation or friend and family or relative support becomes hazardous. So reluctance to shop might mean less fresh produce, more frozen or canned. Purchasing limits have made it difficult for large families to get sufficient quantities of things like eggs or milk or butter. And we've talked about on previous webinars, the trauma of food insecurity may also trigger a feast or famine mindset in some consumers, leading them to purchase more than they actually need, even if it puts their financial stability at risk. The media is full of stories of people who have bought food they don't even like or know how to prepare. And many who've lost their jobs are having to rely on distribution networks or pantries to access food. So CalFresh Healthy Living topics are relevant. Budgeting, food security resources, food storage topics, cooking education are essential skills in this difficult environment. Even home gardening, kind of a supporting player in the CalFresh universe, has seen a huge surge in interest. I did a little Google Trends search, and you can see that starting at the stay-at-home orders, home gardening was getting a lot of airtime on the interwebs. But aside from our normal topics, social isolation is very real for many in our community. Those of us sheltering at home with kids and partners may not feel this as acutely, but I think the requirement that virtual education interventions must include interaction is vital. Making sure that we are seeking to be in relationship with our community members, not just sharing content, is essential. Luckily, CalFresh Healthy Living is able to respond to these changes. We've had to make some accommodations, but our work can continue. So what's next? Some aspects of this work will remain in place even as congregate education continues. We accept this as a going concern, and then it makes a planning step even more important. We need to think about documenting processes, and lost my place, collecting data, analyzing impact so that we can continue to learn and improve. I think without a consideration of the next normal, we might fall into a mindset of reactivity, where the planning and the post-mortem don't matter because, oh, this will all go away very quickly. So our assumption is that we're going to do this, and we're going to do it for the foreseeable future to some degree, and that we want to do it well. So we hope you'll join us on this adventure, and I'll pass the mic over to Danielle.
Great, thank you, Adrienne. So before we cover planning, let's define virtual direct education in the CalFresh Healthy Living program. Virtual direct education has 3 components. It uses an approved curriculum. It's a class that has at least 20 minutes in length, and participant interaction, which may be either via a live class or interactive media. And you have all received specific guidance from your state agencies, which we'll briefly review during the curriculum section. The aim of this webinar is to assist you with the process of planning for virtual direct education. Since we know there remains some gray area with regards to participant interaction and a lot of interesting examples of hybrid learning, we encourage you to stay in communication with your state office or program officer as you plan and implement. We are not able to approve any specific plans. Also, we wanted to point out that in many cases, activities originally planned as direct ed on your IWP will end up being indirect ed. This may feel frustrating since your planned direct ed numbers will need to be revised downward. Our suggestion is to consider this year a learning year and leverage your strongest opportunities. Focus on meeting participant and partner needs and capacities, even if that means interventions will be recorded as indirect. And develop high quality virtual interventions of any kind will lead to the most impact for program participants and the most professional development for staff as well. So today we'll explore 4 components of planning for successful online intervention. You'll need to select your intended audience and choose your curriculum and technology platform. Then you'll need to consider what training you or your staff will require to get up and running successfully. To choose your audience, it may help to think about the sites that you work with. When Leah's Pantry did a lot of direct ed in San Francisco, we had quite a variety of sites that made up our portfolio. Some of our workshops were attended by a committed group who showed up every week, and those participants really had a powerful connection to the hosting site. Other workshops were large groups of elementary school kids, for example, who moved from one activity to another during a summer camp program. So we encourage you to consider which sites you think will have the best chance of connecting with. Start with sites where you can leverage your experience and relationships. Maybe you have a great relationship with the site staff, the wellness coordinator, the third grade teacher, or the resident services manager. Start in a place where you feel comfortable, because sorting out effective online education might require some or a lot of tweaking to get it right. So this slide shows one way to think about your sites. This isn't the only way, but may be useful as you move through the planning process. Schools are one big opportunity for virtual education. And though most schools have finished for the year, it could be a great time to start exploring opportunities for next year. Though we don't know what will happen next year, we know that districts are simultaneously planning for distance learning, hybrid learning, or even a full return to traditional teaching. Districts will be making their decisions based on local transmission data and working with local health departments. If you currently work in partnership with schools, you are probably aware of those details in your area. If you'd like to engage, once school is back in session, now may be a time to start scenario planning with school leadership. We've been working with several schools in southeastern San Diego this spring, creating school gardening videos, and this direct education has set us up well for more sophisticated interventions next year. We've maintained a strong relationship with the school principal, we've collected data on the videos, and we've started planning for several scenarios. We've also been in regular communication with our project funders, keeping them updated as we go. So we'll get back to the other types of sites in a minute, but first, in the chat box, we'd love to hear about what has been successful or stressful in planning with schools during this time, and how are you starting to plan for next year? So communication has been a challenge. Great, people are already having success, having a solid relationship with school's admin. Uncertainty is the biggest issue, right? It's hard to plan when you don't know what the school will, the programming will look like. There's a lot of answers coming in, hard to read them all. Starting to ask about their online platforms, what programs they are currently using for distance learning, how to reach families with poor internet connection. That's definitely a significant concern. Closed captioning services for live open sessions and virtual tabling events. Challenges or not having access to lessons that students have done. Great, so it's hard to know what to build from if you don't know what they're currently learning. Some people are facing a limited number of attendees. Great, so thank you for sharing some of those successes and challenges, and we'll continue to read through them after the webinar as well. So moving back to the different sites. Let's call the second group low-touch sites. These sites may have fewer one-on-one interactions between site staff and participants. Participants might not know each other, and you might have had less consistency from class to class. This could be a library, drop-in center, or a food pantry. And at these sites, staff may not have strong relationships with program participants, which might make it more difficult to recruit them for a class. We'll talk in depth about marketing and promotion on the next webinar, but this is important to consider for planning as well. How will you get reliable information about what participants connected to that site want to learn, or how they will be able to access a virtual class? Low-touch sites may not be the best fit for direct education unless a strong marketing plan is in place. A third group is the high-touch sites. These sites are distinguished by a strong connection between the site staff and the program participants. These program participants might be regular clients of an ongoing program. Site staff are able to contact individuals via text, phone, or email and invite them to participate in a class. They could also assess needs and interests more easily than low-touch sites. For example, on the third webinar in this series, we'll hear from Nick at Northern Valley Catholic Social Service, who will share about his success running Zoom classes with clients of a wellness center. And the staff lead at the site was truly instrumental in engaging the participants. So finally, what about new opportunities? This is where some creativity can come in. Consider if there are new sites, I'm doing air quotes, that you can access virtually. So today, Valeria will share how they've leveraged micro neighborhood site Nextdoor. And on our second webinar, Catholic Charities of Santa Rosa, will share how they're working with both physical sites that they've partnered with in the past, and also how they're tapping into their extensive Facebook community. So once you've identified your initial sites, you can call or email site staff. When you do get in touch, we recommend that you prepare to be flexible. Make it clear that you want to find a way to be responsive to participant needs and not necessarily kind of present a finished plan to the site. Figure out what capacity they have and what they've been doing already. Find out what opportunities there are to learn about current participant needs. Being transparent and taking the time to listen and gather information from partners will help build trust and effective programming. And so related to listening, make sure you ask about barriers. Some sites may feel that they have more pressing priorities than nutrition education, or they just simply don't have a way to contact participants about a class. Taking the long view will take pressure off conversations as well. Your sites may not be ready now, but if they know you are open to providing distance opportunities for their clients, it could set things up nicely for a summer or fall virtual class. For sites that are ready, the first step is to learn as much as possible about potential participants, even if you have worked with them before. Some questions that would be good to ask site staff include, what is the digital literacy and access of your proposed audience? How do you know? How can you learn? What is the appetite for digital learning among this population? And what do they need right now? What are they interested in learning about in terms of nutrition and cooking? Are there particular needs that have emerged? What do we know about their current access to food? And the key learning here is that when you have a strong relationship to the site lead, and the lead has strong relationships with potential participants, your intervention is more likely to be successful. We've seen this from many partners, and you'll see this as a theme in the Partner Bright Spot slide deck that we'll be sharing with you after this webinar. So not all of you will work through partner sites. Some of you might recruit directly from participant populations via social media or other avenues that you have. The same questions are relevant in this scenario, and strong relationships are a good indicator of success. When the Institute for Public Strategy shares their story in a few minutes, this topic will come up again. But we'll first share a little of our own experience. So early in the pandemic, we quickly turned our in-person food waste workshops into virtual education in San Mateo through a partnership with Office of Sustainability and our fellow nonprofit Fresh Approach. The first thing we did was leverage our site contacts to distribute a survey to potential participants. Some of the questions we asked were, how likely are you to use or participate in the following ways to continue connecting to this project? Joining a small group conference, joining a small group video. We just included a variety of options that were kind of on the table. And all of the responses that we received helped us shape the programming that we ultimately offered. You'll hear more about this project, especially the challenges of class promotion and partnerships that make this possible when Fresh Approach joins us live next week. So before we jump into the next planning step, we want to poll all of you. So the question is, Have you viewed any virtual videos or participated in any virtual classes over the last couple of months? And it's from another organization, not your own. We'll give it a few more seconds. About half of the people on the webinar have responded. Great, I think we can end the poll and we'll share the results. Great, so I'm not positive you can see the results, but I can share them. Over half of you have indeed watched some virtual direct ed. About a quarter of you have not, and then another 16% plan to. So thanks for sharing kind of what you've done. And this is related to our next planning tip, which is learn from others. So virtual education is a new territory for many of us. Just from interviewing a handful of partners and compiling the Bright Spots PowerPoint slide deck, I've learned about different platforms, facilitation styles, and promotion strategies. Do you attend any online events outside of work, such as exercise classes or virtual book club? Think about what makes those activities successful and how could you translate those elements into a CalFresh Healthy Living online event. We've mentioned our resource guide a few times, which includes the compiled Bright Spot slide deck, along with links to specific direct ed sessions. If you want to share links to any of your recorded sessions, please send them to me at danielle@leahspantry.org. We'd love to include them in that resource guide. So when you're watching or participating in another virtual class, consider the following things. What was engaging for you? Did it fit your personal or organizational style? What were the presentation details? Was it scripted or off the cuff? How was the pacing, interaction breaks, discussion opportunities? What about the filming details? How was lighting, the room setup, or camera perspective? If there was a food demo, what were the logistics like? Where was the demo located? Were all of the ingredients ready to go? Did it feel too long, too short? And finally, the use of materials. How did they use slides, posters, visual aids? Visuals that work well in an in-person setting may not translate to virtual direct ed. Also, if you live in a household with other people, think about recruiting them for a little market research. When we launched our virtual garden education classes in San Diego, Adrienne had her 2 boys watch the video to see whether they could do the activity the educator was explaining. She took notes on their attention span and then interviewed them afterwards to see what they thought. Right away, they had great feedback for our educator, who was brand new to this style of teaching, and she really appreciated the comments. We learned little things like pause after directions for longer than you want to, and then repeat them, which felt awkward without a live group of students in front of her, but it was essential for Adrienne's boys to keep up with the hands-on activity. I think this particular tip might be really relevant if you're doing a label reading lesson and asking your participants to grab a food package and play along. So if you were feeling nervous about facilitating, having family members critique other people's videos might allow you to avoid some initial mistakes without asking your partner or kids to critique you. So moving on, once you've spoken to some of your site partners, have a good sense of participant interests and needs, and have learned from others doing this work, it's time to choose your curriculum. Depending on your funder, you'll probably have different options for what to use. When you registered, we asked you what you were using or plan to use, and we summarized your responses in this pie chart. The takeaways here are that about a third of you have not selected curriculum or do not intend to teach and are watching this webinar to provide support to others. But the other takeaway is that a lot of options are going to work well. You all responded with over 50 different curriculum choices. About a quarter of you specified a curriculum, but that curriculum didn't receive 10 total responses, so we just grouped them together. About 20% of you specified a Leah's Pantry program, which includes Food Smarts, Around the Table, eatfresh.org mini course, and the remainder of you identified a generally approved curriculum like Catch, Eat Healthy, Be Active, or the OC Nutrition 5 class series. So last week, CDPH released guidance clarifying that LHDs can use any approved curriculum on the state list. Previous guidance had limited curriculum to 1 per age group, so the timing may be good for many of you as you expand your direct ed plans into the summer and fall. Catholic Charities, UCCE, and CDA have released similar guidance. And the general theme is that the curriculum must be SIA approved, and curriculum fidelity must be maintained, in addition to having an interactive component. And again, please direct any specific curriculum questions to your state agency or program officer. So here are some questions that you can ask while selecting a curriculum. What do I use now, and can I imagine delivery online? So starting with what you know is a great place to start. Think through that curriculum and how it might translate to a virtual format. If it's really interactive curriculum, it might be best for Zoom or a meeting platform. If it's more presentation style, that might translate to Facebook Live. Or if it's presentation style, it might, translate to Facebook Live. And Adrian will talk about this more during choosing a tech platform. It doesn't look like it's moved to the next slide. I think it's just a little delayed, so it'll show up in a second. So if what you're currently using won't translate to a virtual format, consider what other choices are allowed by your funder. What options do you need for language, series length, closed captioning? Hopefully you know your participants' needs and preferences at this point as a result of working with your partner sites or directly with your participants. And what support or resources are needed for this transition, and are they available? Do you need PowerPoint slides, for example, or technical assistance with virtual interaction? What materials or posters do you rely on for in-person classes, and how well will those transfer online? And are adapted lesson plans available, or are you going to need to make those adaptations yourself? And who can support you with all of this? And next, what interactive elements do you want to retain online? Is there community building through participant conversation or hands-on cooking? Start thinking through food demos, label reading, and discussion questions now, and consider which appliances, ingredients, foods, participants might have at home that would give them some hands-on interaction during your class. When looking at a lesson plan, ensure that there's time for questions so participants can get help with topics that are of particular concern during this time. Next, think about yourself as an educator. What are your strengths and how can you leverage them? Maybe you feel comfortable with facilitation, but you're worried about technology. Who can support you to build those skills? If the facilitation seems overwhelming, remember that over time, you'll become more comfortable. And initially though, interactive media options, which do not require live facilitation, might be a good fit. And then I'm sure many of you have other considerations when selecting a curriculum, so that's what we've indicated as other notes. And now Adrian is going to talk a little bit about choosing a tech platform.
Okay, thanks, Danielle. That was a lot of information. Everybody need to take a deep breath, process. Yeah, we're definitely trying to cram in everything we've learned from all of you into this 45 minutes. So I know it's not quite what you're used to with Leah's Pantry trainings, but we appreciate everybody participation, and we're getting so much good stuff in the chat box and the Q&A. We're definitely trying to keep up, but we'll maybe have to circle back at the end. So if you said something and you need that question answered, either put it in the Q&A or you may have to remind us on the chat box. Okay, so technology platform can be a big topic. So once you've determined your curriculum, you have to think about how to share it, right? So Danielle mentioned interactive media, which includes things like the eatfresh.org mini course, which some of you are familiar with. That's on something called the learning management system. Other platforms similar to this are like Google Classroom, if some of your kids may be on that. We're not going to actually focus on this type of platform for this webinar because we think what's more likely, we'll talk a little bit about the mini course, but I think what's more likely is that you'll be using some kind of meeting software or social media or building interaction into a YouTube video. So we'll focus on those. I did put up a poll to collect some data on what people are using. So I'm interested to learn that. We didn't ask it in the registration question. So I just launched the poll. Let me know what you're thinking of using. If I didn't include what you're using, feel free to throw it into the chat box. We're gonna go through the web chat at the end and pull out all the information. So it looks like Zoom. Oh, wow. Zoom is doing well. It's like a horse race when you're watching the polls go, you know, like those ones at the county fair where you like fire the water gun. Lauren's laughing at me, I'm a little punchy. Facebook Live also seems to be popular. A WebEx, okay, I see you, Lena. Oh, Teachable, that's interesting. I don't know what Teachable is, if it's a learning platform or if it's a meeting software, but we'll definitely check that out. Okay, I did forget WebEx, and there's plenty of you that are using WebEx. So YouTube, and that would be more of like a hybrid model, because YouTube itself as a video wouldn't be direct education. Okay, I'm gonna end the polling now, but, oh, people are still voting. It's too exciting to stop. Okay, so I'll share the results, you guys can see. Okay, so if I didn't put something to the platform, share it. From our conversations with all of you over the past few months, we know there's a lot of gray area with regard to interactive components as they relate to asynchronous communication, such as YouTube. So really just make sure that you're staying in contact with your program officer. Some things you want to think about are on this slide here. So these are just some questions, you know, is cost a barrier? You already have something for free, you're probably using it. Practice using something for the first time. You may have forgotten what it's like to log on to Zoom, but do it on a mobile phone, do it on a computer, whatever you're planning on using. Really get to know that first time experience for people, because that's what's going to help with retention. If they can't even get on the first class, you're kind of lost. Check out the interactive features as well. How can people interact in a way that really works? So if you use Zoom as an example, you can kind of see how I answered these questions. And you guys probably had similar answers to these questions, but I'd recommend kind of going through it, especially if you want to add a platform outside of what you've been using originally. So the last thing I want to talk about is before, and Danielle's going to give a couple of examples of information after I finish with the capacity building, but this is, I think, important and bears some thought on your part in the organization, is really how are you going to leverage your current staff strengths, identify what you need to build a successful direct education plan into the future. So really leverage that peer-to-peer learning and support among your team and build upon people's strengths. Expect that people are going to be insecure in the beginning. Expect that it's not going to be comfortable, and just build that into the process. Don't let people suffer silently, because they're going to grow faster if they feel like it's okay to express some negative feelings. Assessing that technological infrastructure, internet may be better in your office, but technology may be better at home. Really think about what's going to work well. Practice using the technology that you have. And then really practice with each other. Use staff meetings and other meetings to give people the opportunity that they need to do this well. So we are running a little bit short on time. We've gotten a few minutes over. So Danielle, I'm hoping you can take over the next few slides and do the examples.
Sure.
Yep. So what we've done now, is we've kind of gone through 2 examples showing you how you might plan for this type of online education.
So I mentioned the chat box. We are going to run about 10 minutes over. Sorry, we just tried to cram so much goodness in there. We understand if you need to leave, this will be recorded and shared. So stay as long as you can. So now that we've covered the basic planning steps, we're going to show you 2 examples, and then Valeria is going to jump in and share a third. So one example will be an interactive media example that uses the eatfresh.org mini course. The second example will be a live session using Food Smarts, and then again, we'll hear from IPS and about what they've done. So the first one, the eatfresh.org mini course. As many of you know, the mini course has been in the CalFresh Healthy Living program for a long time and has always been considered interactive media under the DirectEd framework. The course allows data card collection information, and it's easy to track where people are coming from using the referral codes. If you'd like more detailed information about this course, you can watch a webinar we recently held for the UC Healthy CalFresh program, which is now on our YouTube channel. And I think I'm gonna screen share because I realized Adrienne has to hop off, but she has the slides. Let me just do this now. Wait, actually, Lauren, are you able to do that?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you. Okay, great. So we can share the webinar to more detailed information about Eat Fresh mini course implementation if you're interested in that. So in an example with a mini course, let's pretend we have a group of older adults who were very involved in a senior center prior to COVID and had taken some computer classes offered through the site. The wellness coordinator has been doing some phone calls with her clients, and they're interested in doing some virtual education. To get up and running quickly, we decided to use Zoom technology to deliver the Spanish version of the mini course as a group and allow time for discussion after each topic. We expect to cover the first 5 topics over 3 30-minute meetings. And if the group wants to do more topics, we will continue on. So in order to simplify the technology for seniors, we only want them to install Zoom, but not the mini course. This means the technology is a little trickier for us as facilitators, but we will put one staff member on tech support. She'll be in charge of helping get everyone onto the meeting, answering chat box questions, and keeping mics open or muted as necessary. Our other facilitator will do the talking, but not have to worry about the technology. And since everyone is using 2 computers, we are all going to get onto Zoom or our mobile phones and practice different features in advance, since the participants don't have the computers and will want to help them. So we'll also have to practice the session with the wellness coordinator so she can help us iron out any kinks before inviting the participants to join. So as you can see from this example, using interactive media takes some of the pressure off delivery and allows for a focus and customization on the participants. Knowing in advance some of the technology barriers helps us design an experience that will be successful. And adding in a second facilitator and involving the site lead in planning are both best practices as well. So in our second example, which is slide 41, thank you, Lauren. This is for a live session of DirectEd using Around the Table curriculum, which is a newer addition to our portfolio and the CalFresh Healthy Living program. It was also recently accepted into the SnapEd Toolkit, which we are very excited about. This curriculum upholds principles of trauma-informed facilitation and engages youth using a holistic lens of nourishment and wellness. Next month, we are planning to deliver this curriculum via Zoom to a group of former foster youth participating in 6-month resilience program. So in this example, which is a project that Adrian's working on in San Diego, the class was already scheduled, so they're just going to go ahead with an existing program. The audience is older youth participants who have aged out of the foster system and are clients of our partner site. This series is part of a larger initiative, so we're confident that we'll have 25 youth participating in the 6 classes held over 12 weeks. We chose around the table, but we'll need to modify some aspects for virtual delivery over Zoom, which is the platform that the youth already use at other programs at the site. So we need to retain the integrity of the program, especially the youth-led portions, the conversation, and the cooking literacy. We'll share more about this project during the 3rd webinar, but I'll share a few examples that require some planning. So for one, we want the youth to eat together in the breakout rooms, but we'll have staff from Leah's Pantry and our host site help facilitate the discussions and iron out any challenges finding the materials. We're also considering using some pre-recorded videos instead of doing everything live to reduce the pressure on having to execute it all while managing a lot of technology. And for our 3rd example, we'll invite Valeria from Institute for Public Strategies to share about their direct education experience. And we asked them to share their story because we think they did an amazing job with selecting a platform that meets participants where they are and really builds upon previous successes. And while the focus of the webinar is planning, Valeria is going to share a few slides about their entire experience. And Valeria, hopefully you're unmuted now and able to speak. And just let us know when we should move to the next slide for you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Valeria. I am the health educator for the Institute of Public Strategies, their Healthy Communities project. So basically going off a little bit about what you were all saying, due to the whole COVID-19 situation that we're in, we've realized that we still needed to complete all our deliverables, but doing that in person was not an option anymore, or even with, you know, a minimum amount of people in a room. It didn't feel safe for us, and it also didn't feel safe for the community either. So what we did is that we just decided to do online virtual ed, and we were going through a bit of platforms. One of them was Instagram that we thought would be good, and then the other one, which we ended up going with and using, is Facebook. And the reason why we chose Facebook is because in the previous cohorts that I've had with parents, I noticed that a majority of them, and I want to say 95 of the participants in the class, of the parents in the class, they were on Facebook and they were using Facebook on a regular basis. They had groups in it, they were very interactive within it. And at a particular site, our Palomares Academy, it's a high school that I taught at, that cohort, they asked if I could create a Facebook group for them in order for them to interact and talk about the recipes, talk about the lessons, or ways that they were doing healthy alternatives so that they could help each other when I wasn't there when the class would end. So I thought that was a really great thing, especially that it came from them, because the whole thing that we're trying to do here is create a sustainable behavior that will keep going after our classes end, because after they end, we can't really do the same site over again. So I did the Facebook group for them, and I noticed that it was very active, and it felt like a small community based on what we had done in the cohort. So when it came time to do the nutrition ed via online and, you know, a platform, I thought that Facebook was the best one to use because, one, a majority of people are already on it, specifically adults. It's a very popular app within adults, and it's a very easy and user-friendly website and also app. So it can go either or, whether they wanted to use it on their desktop or their laptop or do it through the app. So what I went and did is I created a cohort a private cohort for the specific group that I was going to be teaching. In this case, it's on the slide here. It says nutrition class cohort 1. That is what I labeled it. And the classes are 30 to 35 minutes, and we have a nutrition lecture and a food demo. So next slide. So as I said before, Facebook was the safest bet for us and for our participants too. And again, it was very popular within that community. And we did do a survey for our participants. We did ask them what kind of language they preferred, the time and date, any form of contact, and what kind of access to technology they had, whether they were going to do it through the phone or they were going to do it through their laptops, if they had access to technology at all. And it was pretty, we had a really good amount of responses. Obviously, you have that same fallout that you would have when you are doing the classes in person and recruiting. So that was expected, but we did get a good response and turnout. Next slide. So our outreach was conducted through social media and by reaching out to previous partners that we had where we did our cohorts in person. The social media apps that we use, the platforms were Instagram, Facebook, and Nextdoor. We have a lot of reach on Instagram, but what we noticed when we were using Instagram is that we were getting people to sign up that were outside of our spot in the area where we were allowed to give classes. That to us was difficult because unfortunately they can't sign up, or if they could, we had to give priority to our people first, our community. But it's also a really good thing because it shows that these classes are making it online is more inclusive and more accessible to people. And then so after that, I decided to focus more on Nextdoor for the outreach, just because the Nextdoor targeted my specific community where I was in. So you input your address and it targets your neighborhoods around you. So once I did it through Nextdoor, the majority of the people that were signing up were from Pomona and surrounding areas. And then again, the survey, a majority of people decided to go, their preferred form of contact was direct message on whichever platform they were reached. And I think we only have 2 people that chose text and email, but it surprised me that a majority of them were leaning more towards staying within the app and messaging each other through there. Next. And then some important lessons that we learned was, the first one is, to me was very important, is the fact that participants really like the option of having the classes online versus in person. I realized that it made it more inclusive and more accessible to them, specifically the ones that were in the low income communities. I expected them to not have access to internet or technology, but even we have seniors in the class that are like, no, I have it on my phone. And my daughter made a Facebook profile for me and I can work it through my phone. So even within that, I realized that they were more open to the option of doing it online versus in person. The participants really valued my transparency with them and my flexibility. Transparency in the sense that this is my first time doing any classes online. So it's very different online versus in person. You have to try really, really hard to make it more interactive and engaging for them. So I was very honest with them. And I think that they appreciated that because they, along with us, were getting used to this new system that we were doing. And my flexibility in the sense of, if there were Spanish speakers, I would just do a separate cohort for them within that class, so that the class was 100% in Spanish for them and they had their own time. The classes for Facebook, personally, I think they are a very, very good alternative to in-person classes, specifically when you have a group that is created just for that class, because it gives them the same feeling of interaction and engagement as they would if they were coming to the class in person. It gives them a sense of community, which I think at the end of the day, that is what you want to do with these classes. You want them to engage, you want them to interact. And if it's not in person, then we have to figure out a different way. And I think that Facebook is a very good platform for that. And these are just a couple of examples of the promotions that we did. So the one that says, "Welcome to Leah's Pantry Food Smarts," that's our intro for our actual direct classes and food demos. So that is kind of like an intro that we sent to them to keep them engaged as we were editing the videos and working on them and filming on them. And then the picture in the middle, that's kind of a recipe that we used from the Eat Smarts and everything. And like we were letting them know, this is what you can expect. And then the other one with the blender, that's just a promo that I created to in English and Spanish to promote the classes and get people to sign up. And then for me, what made this successful is the constant interaction that I have between the participants and myself. I reach out to them through their preferred form of contact, letting them know, hey, reminder, there's a class today. I post on the Facebook group. I post different recipes they can use with the food demos we're going to be doing. I post information from the food demos, like information that I would do in person. I do the same thing, but instead I do it online. So I try to keep that same interaction and feeling as if I was giving the classes in person, but online instead. Filming and editing and transcribing the subtitles, it does take a while. I will admit that. Time management is definitely key. If you are editing and transcribing everything, be prepared to do around a day to 2 days of work. Once you get used to it, you can do a day and a half, and that's pretty much all you need. Trial and error is necessary. The first 2 lessons that we did, it was kind of just feeling the waters and seeing how they were responding to what I was doing, and definitely asking for feedback. They gave the feedback, and that's what I followed on and picked up on, and that's how the classes have turned out a little bit better. And then again, the participants really enjoyed the idea of online classes versus in person. These are just some of the quotes that I've had for the comments for the Facebook classes, also emails and during phone calls. Again, they appreciated our flexibility. They were impressed at how much information came from cooking oils they were not aware of. And they liked the classes, and they really liked the option of having the opportunity to watch it again and as many times. Because when you do a live video on Facebook, whether it's in your group or on your personal page, the video actually stays within your feed, the live video. So if someone misses a class, they can come in later and watch it. And that's what they liked. And yeah, that's kind of what we did. The food demo was pre-recorded. That was filmed before, and then I edit that. And Sean is the one Sean Bell, my coworker, he films the video. I edit it, add the graphics and everything. And that's kind of just how it works. I post that beforehand, and then the nutrition lecture is what's live.
Great. Thank you, Valeria, so much. I think your story is such a great example of being responsive to participant needs and truly building community through this online platform. There were a few questions that came in. So Anna asked, how do you collect data cards when using, oh no, this is not for you, this is for Facebook Live, which actually, Christian and his team at Catholic Charities of Santa Rosa will be able to answer next week. But there is a specific question for you. Did you notice that adults' kids were around, and how did that go?
Yeah, so some of the adults did have children around. Some of them had senior citizens around. And the kids were very much into the classes. I believe there's one family who has children, and they were coming in and watching the class. And I think the fact that they had the option to do it in their own home from the comfort of their own home, they had other people around them to help them with the children while they themselves took the class, which is, again, it's taking that into consideration when you're doing in the in-person like teaching. they probably don't have that person to help them out, or they have to bring the kids with them, and that's something that can, you know, impede them from coming to the classes.
Great. And then one other question, can you explain how you collected the data card information?
Yeah, so before that, we do our pre-survey before they actually participate in the class. So as they're signing up, we ask them questions about, you know, the regular, your age, your ethnicity, male or female, do you participate in EBT or any food smarts programs? And then we also do give them the pre-survey through a Google Sheet, which Fresia created. And then they turn that into us, and it's pretty much taken care of as soon as they sign up.
Great, thank you. So you basically, you have them complete the data card before they even join the Facebook group.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And we had a bunch of questions come in. We will answer those. We'll figure out a way to share all of our answers to those. Also, I just saw that we missed a UC moment of silence, which I am incredibly sorry about that we missed that. It was at 11. We did not anticipate to run this over. There was so much information. I know our team is participating in the NAACP moment of silence at 12:45 today, but I'm really sorry that we missed that. And so here are some resources that we'll be sharing over the course of the webinar series. And we hope that you've enjoyed this webinar. Thank you for the 270 of you who stayed on. We really appreciate your participation and partnership. And as always, reach out to us with any questions. We hope to see you next week for our marketing and promotion webinar. And I promise that it will not go over. We just had a ton of content today. So I hope you all have a wonderful and safe day. Thank you.
Okay.